Now you would think that given the choice of change or die, most people would choose changing, wouldn't you think? So it might surprise you to know that if someone has a heart attack or a cardiac episode because they have a blocked artery, and then they have whatever the procedure is of the day, a stent, a bypass, etc., we know that if they don't change their behavior, their diet, their way they deal with stress, exercise, etc., that they will have another attack or a procedure. It's pretty much science. So anyone want to guess what percentage of people faced with the choice change or die actually change their behavior sustainably 18 months later? Anyone want to guess what percentage actually change their diet, their exercise, their behavior, their stress, etc.? 30%? You are an optimist about human behavior. 15%. Only 15 out of every 100 people, having given the stark choice of change to die, will actually change their behavior. That's why the work of this guy, Dean Ornish, is so fascinating, who I've met a couple of times. Dean was a cardiologist in Santa Barbara, California, and he looked at these sad statistics and thought he could change it. So he went to Mutual of Omaha Insurance and he said, how much does it cost you to have somebody have a second bypass? That was the procedure of the day. And he said, if I can turn that ratio around so fewer people have a bypass, and they were good actuaries, they knew exactly how many people would have a second bypass, will you give me a percentage of the money that I save for my research if I can prove that I can turn that ratio around? They said, sure. And by the way, if I can't change their behavior, you pay me nothing. Dean Ornish proves within a couple of years that he can turn that ratio completely around to where 85 to 87% of his patients will have made sustainable changes that last. And you said, what did Dean Ornish do that other doctors did not know? I'll tell you the three things he did. First thing he discovered was that the fear of dying was not actually a good motivator for people to change. It turns out it was more paralyzing than it was catalyzing. He found out if you wanted people to change, you had to get them to talk about the benefits of making a change. What would be true of your life if you made this change? Well, I could run again. I could play tennis again. I could have sex with my wife. I'll live to hike with my grandchildren. If people talked about the joy of living instead of the fear of death, it would work. Let me make this real for you as a leader. All the time in leadership we talk about we have to change because we're on a burning platform. Not about you. If you're a smart person who has talent and has any credibility in the marketplace, if your leader comes to you and says you're on a burning platform, what is the logical thing to do? Move companies. Find a company that's not on a burning platform. If you go out all day long telling your people, we got to change because if we don't, we're going to die. We need to talk to people about the positive benefits of change. What is in it for you to do it? Second thing he discovered was that when you're trying to make change, you can't shame people. For example, any of you have ever been on a diet, what do we say when we go off our diet? We say a C word. We say I cheated. How do you feel when you call yourself a cheat? Good or bad? Bad. So you go off your diet a couple of days. What do? You don't exercise for a couple of days. You start thinking of yourself as a cheat. You now have one of two choices. You either beat yourself up every day or you lower your expectations. And so what Dean Ornish found was instead of talking about, good and bad, he talked about what he called the spectrum diet. Some foods are good for you, some are less good for you. And you can be anywhere on the spectrum. And by the way, if you go off the diet one day or you're on the bad side, just say, I was on the bad side of the spectrum today, tomorrow I'll be on the good side. The third thing that he discovers that is so important is that you can't change anybody else. They have to choose to change. So for example, Dean Ornish discovers that when the doctor tells the patient, if you don't make this change, you're going to die, the patient is actually less likely to change than before the doctor gave them that information. So you said, what would Dean do instead? Dean would say, by the way, here's your cholesterol, here's your situation. If you make no changes in your lifestyle, you have a 70% chance of having a heart attack in the next decade. You have a 20% chance of having a stroke, et cetera, et cetera. If you make some modest changes in your lifestyle, and here's what that might look like. Here's, you did this, you did that. Here's the percentages of what would be true. And by the way, if you made really radical changes in your lifestyle, here's what they would look like. This is what's going to be true of your future. Which would you like to choose? And what Dean Ornish discovers, and then it's replicated over and over again in research, is that when you give people the choice to choose to change instead of being told to change, they're anywhere from 70 to 90% more likely to make a change than being told to change. So now you begin to say, how does this apply to leadership? You may begin to kind of make some of those connections yourself. First of all, as Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, said, a person can endure anyhow if they only have a why. The first thing, our first role as leaders, we must help people understand the why of change. A change comes down from RBC above you. You can't just say you got to change, that's the way it is. Here's the change, here's why. You've got to sell every change that is made. And as you think about that why of change, think about really four things. First of all, we have to work with the why longer than we think we should. Well, I told you why. No, you keep coming back to the why. By the way, I know we've got this new procedure. Here's why. We need to kind of up our ante on, selling more products to our customers, clients. Here's why. We need to present the why and encourage skeptics. Now, you tell me, why is it so important to encourage skeptics? Anybody? If I'm presenting a case for why and I'm actually inviting skepticism, why? You tell me. Yeah. All right, it gives you a chance to dispel any misinformation. What else? What happens when I ask you if you have any concerns or are skeptical about a change? Are you now a bystander or are you in the game? You're in the game. You're involved. Suddenly now you are in the conversation with me. And by the way, those skeptics may also make the change go more effectively because they may have ideas on how to make it go more smoothly. Third, ask people what they see as the benefits of the change. It's great for you to sell the benefits, even more important for them to. So let me give you a real example. You want to go back and say to your team, I'd like us to up our results by 10 or 15% in the next year, whatever it is. We want to be the best in the region. And I'd like to talk to you about that. Here's why I think it would be great. What do you think? Do you think that would be a worthy goal? What do you think would be in it for us if we did that? And suddenly people begin to see the benefits. And finally, if you can't advocate a change as a leader, it's your job to ask questions until you can.